I'll begin with some prayer, and we'll jump right in. So, dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this wonderful day, this beautiful morning, another beautiful morning that we have, that we could all ably get here and get the fellowship that we desperately need. We're always in need of fellowship with one another, and with everything that happens in this life down here on earth, you know as more than we do how important it is for us to get together and to share our feelings and our open our hearts to each other and discussion and laugh and learn more about you, and we're gonna do a lot more reading into your word today, and we thank you for everything that we're given. We're so thankful that we just have your word, which is just key to everything in this life and keeps us on your path. And we thank you for what your Son has done on the cross, and that's the reason why we have joy and peace and salvation, and we can live a life free of worry of anything after this. We thank you again for allowing us to just get together and celebrate you every single day. And it's through your Son, Jesus, that we're able to do so. Amen. I had a lot of fun going through the tail end of Deuteronomy. I finished reading it. Wow, time just goes by. I mean, it must have been at least the beginning of March or so. So now, seeing that it's already the end of May, I'm just like, I need a little refresher myself. So I'm excited to jump in and read some of this today. Because it's been a little while, even a couple months with how busy life goes. It's wild how quickly things can go, and everything that's just happens, how much goes in and out of your brain every single day. You got to remember. But we left off talking about some of the events and some of the things that we paralleled with back then. We saw some of the laws that God was telling them. Or that Moses was telling the new generation that was from God that they needed to hear. I mean, before they go into the promised land, he was really getting them prepared for that. And we found so many parallels to today and the people that are faced with all the decisions and all the challenges that we are faced here on this earth today. And we got through Deuteronomy 17 and 18 and 19. And so I'll start with 20, and we'll go through and look at some of these. So that's where I'll jump in here and open my word. And so one thing that spoke to me a little bit about Deuteronomy 20 is and these are just my feelings, but I have a hard time understanding why we have to have war. I think a lot of people feel that way. Why is there so much war? Why people can't get along, you know? But as we know, Satan is doing a terrible job of running this world, and so you know, we have different people who just don't get along on this planet, I think, and in a simple way to think about it. But it's interesting how God handles it, and you know, I have to wrap my mind around, well, God accepts it too. I mean, he in 20 it opens up with the priests and how they prepared for battle. So I'll start with verse 1. When thou goest out to battle against thine enemies, and seest horses and chariots and people more than thou, be not afraid of them, for the Lord thy God is with thee, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And it shall be, when ye are come nigh unto the battle, that the priest shall approach and speak unto the people, and shall say unto them, Hear, O Israel, ye approach this day unto the battle against your enemies. Let not your hearts faint, fear not, and do not tremble, neither be ye afraid because of them. For the Lord your God is he that goeth with you to fight for you against your enemies to save you. And the officers shall speak unto the people, saying, What man is there that hath built a new house, and hath not dedicated it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man dedicate it. And what man is he that hath planted a vineyard, and hath not yet eaten of it? Let him also go and return unto his house, lest he die in the battle, and other man eat of it. And what man is there that hath betrothed a wife, and hath not taken her? Let him go and return unto his house, lest he die in battle, and another man take her. And the officers shall speak further unto the people, and shall say, What man is there that is fearful and faint-hearted? Let him go and return unto his house, and let his brethren's heart faint as well as his heart. And it shall be, when the officers have made an end of speaking unto the people, that they shall make captains of the armies to lead the people. I thought that was very interesting that today, obviously, if you watch the news, and I don't even watch the news, but it's unavoidable to know that there's a lot of war going on today. And I don't think that's going to cease. I think in these times it's just more and more prevalent. And as we know, there's going to be wars and rumors of wars. And sometimes I wonder how much of these are rumors. You know, we're not out there on the battlefield. I can't tell what's going on out there. I think sometimes the news likes to inflate these things. And not always. I mean, there's definitely battles and killings and lots of awful stuff that goes on over there. But I think one of the things that Satan uses today is just trying to, I mean, the media and stuff will just instill fear in everybody. But what I loved about this is how, if there is to be a battle, and it's just unavoidable, they knew that they needed these priests, I guess, assigned to basically keep their faith, keep their belief in God, even if somebody is stronger, a bigger army, or all that. I just found that passage very, very interesting. And also, I liked how they had exemptions from this. I mean, today, I feel so terrible when people say, you know, I think I might be on the cusp of not eligible, but, you know, draft is a word that's been thrown around a lot. And it always has, but sometimes more so than others. And then you think about these kids, I mean, that just came out of high school or something, getting assigned to do something that they may or may not have really wanted to get into. But these priests, even back then, thousands of years ago, they had reasons to keep people from going into battle. If you had a vineyard and haven't had a chance to eat of it. I mean, that's an interesting passage. A man who has a wife and hasn't even had any time to know what it's like to be married to his wife. That's interesting. And so that was one thing that stuck out to me out of chapter 20. And it goes further on into more details about war. But I just found it fascinating that the most important part was to make sure that the priests prepared Israel and that they were always ready so that they never lost their faith and they always had their confidence there in the Lord. And it makes you wonder today, I don't know how much influence the Lord has in war today, but I'm sure there's some great influence. I would say if I was going out to battle, I'd be praying. I'd be asking the Lord for all the strength and all the all the courage to keep me safe. I don't think I would be asking the Lord for victorious conquering. I would just more or less just would rather, like, I would like to be safe and I would like for this dispute to end peacefully, but that's just my heart. Unfortunately, we know wars don't always go that way, and some of them are pretty brutal. But the Israelites had rules for this thing, for this type of thing, and I thought that was very fascinating in 20. So I wanted to go over that. In 21, moving right along, there's explanations of crimes, and they had different different ways to handle that as well. I thought that's very interesting that they had guidelines and things for almost everything that could happen at these camps, or when they go into their new land. So in verse 1, if one be found slain in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee to possess it, lying in a field, and it be not known who hath slain him, then thy elders and thy judges shall come forth, and they shall measure unto the cities which are round about him that are slain. They they obviously had things for people who, I guess, today we call manslaughter, when somebody accidentally, unfortunately, takes a life from somebody. They had guidelines and things in place for I guess what we would call today, that sounds to me like a homicide, like somebody's found slain and they don't even know who done it, but they had the whole system in place even back then. And we see, we think we have this big elaborate system and detectives and all this stuff, and it's like, no, they already had that all the way back then. There was another verse that I thought was very interesting, and I'll see if I can find it, but I wish I would wrote that one down, because I didn't write that one down. But they minister unto him. I like 8. Be merciful, O Lord, unto thy people Israel, whom thou hast redeemed, and lay not innocent blood unto thy people of Israel's charge, and the blood shall be forgiven them. So shalt thou put away the guilt of innocent blood from among you, when thou shalt do that which is right in the sight of the Lord. Prior to that, the elders of the cities were, that's got to be such a tough task. When I couldn't imagine being a judge. I would never want that position. I just feel like there's so much guilt involved with that. But somebody had to do it back then and today. But it says that they would wash their hands over the heifer that is beheaded in the valley in verse 6. And in 7 it says, they shall answer and say, our hands have not shed this blood, neither have our eyes seen it. But to have to judge a murder that nobody witnessed, and have to say, well, we have reasonable evidence to say that you may have caused this, and that is a guilt that I would never want to have. But they knew that they had to do things in situations like that, but they asked the Lord always just to be merciful, and also be forgiven them. So they always would ask for forgiveness and Lord's guidance. So that was an interesting part of 21 that I wanted to share. There was some 21 had some things that I thought were very rough to read. The firstborn inheritance, which was a big deal back then. But the punishment for rebellious children, I could never imagine having to go through that. And if you read through 18 and 21, I'll probably just glaze over it for today. But they dealt really harshly with children who disobeyed, even to the point of stoning. And but they also had laws regarding death by hanging. In 22 and 23, they did have laws for people who were put to death in that fashion, but they said that his body shall not remain all night upon the tree, but thou shalt be wise and bury him that day, for he that is hanged is accursed of God, that thy land not be defiled, which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. In 23. So even though there's some dark things that had to happen today, back then and today, warfare, people who committed crimes that had to be dealt with, but they had guidelines in place for all of this. So that was some interesting things that stood out to me. 22 gets a little more light. They have some laws against other things, not as much death, but there were definitely some other acts that had to be dealt with, and one of them is adultery in 22, verse 22, and they were dealt with very harshly. It says that they should actually, that both of them shall die, but the man that lay with the woman and the woman, so shalt thou put away evil from Israel. I think even as harsh as we see that, I think it was necessary, I guess, in God's way of dealing with Israel to keep that group of people pure. I mean, it was very important, obviously, to the Lord that they stay very, very pure as His nation. Whereas it makes me wonder, okay, well, these other nations were doing all kinds of evil and weren't put to the same level of consequence. But I think that the main thing I take from that is, well, Israel was set aside, and they were set aside to be pure. So they had very strict dealings with those. In 23, it goes on with people that are excluded from the congregation, and I think most of these were kind of just dealt with for people that were unclean. Let's see, in 19 and 20, that was one thing that really spoke out to me in 23, and it says, "Thou shalt not lend upon usury to thy brother, usury of money, usury of victuals, usury of anything that is lent upon usury. Unto a stranger thou mayest lend upon usury, but unto thy brother thou shalt not lend upon usury, and the Lord thy God may bless thee in all that thou settest thine hand to in the land whither thou goest to possess it." This is one where I feel like the King James Version was definitely difficult for me to understand. I had to actually look up the word usury because I've never heard it used in today's modern English. But when you look at the same translation, and for the sake of time, I won't pull that up. But what that spoke to me was, if you're going to lend to your brother, don't do it with interest. You know, if they, I guess, for example, if they need $500, just say, hey, whenever you can get that back to me, that's fine. But it says to a stranger, thou mayest lend with usury or with repayment on top of what was lent. So what was lended. So I think that was really interesting that they had even a clarification for that. And I mean, does that apply to us today? Not being Israelites, being Gentiles, and not being subject to the law. We live in the age of grace, but I still find that's not a really bad thing to go by. I think if my brother or anybody that I considered a brother, even Jim Bob, a brother in Christ, I think that could extend. You could live by that. You could extend that and say, if anybody needs that, I would like to be, maybe repaid back, especially if that was like a big deal. If somebody had to take out their savings, to help somebody, but it's a brother of them. But you also could need that back in a time. I think that was so that stood out to me in 23, and I want to highlight that.
One of the things I think that's interesting about that, just thinking about it just now, is that it kind of forces people to work for a living.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of people that just make money off of loaning money. You
Yeah.
know? And that's, I think God really prefers for you to work for a living.
Yeah. Well, He gave us these hands and these bodies. I think it's probably sinful in God's eyes to just waste that away, and it makes you wonder. A good point to that is on social media. I think it was on Reddit or something. I like Reddit because whereas Facebook, you have friends and stuff, and you can see, but it's so full of ads and stuff now. It used to just be you scroll through and only saw what your friends say. So now I don't spend near as much time on there as probably I did when I was in my youth. But I like Reddit in a way because it's all strangers. I mean, you don't. It's just all people, but it's discussion board kind of things. Like if somebody has a question, they can just ask that, and then there will just be 500 comments or something just from strangers all over the world too, which is really interesting because you get different perspectives. Whereas some of the social medias that you use, it almost seems like they silo you to America, And when you go to Reddit, it's very interesting and it's very obvious and apparent really quickly when somebody will ask something and say, well, is $50,000 too, what do you guys think? Is that crazy for a brand new truck these days? And blah, blah. And like the first few comments you'll say, oh, in my country, you can't even get that. Or in my country, it would take, 100,000 US dollars or something. You'd have to get it shipped over there or something, they're in Uganda or some other country, and so. But one thing I saw on Reddit one time, and I never forgot this conversation, was there were some people that were just, some people go on there and vent. I don't know how familiar you guys are with it, but sometimes people will go on there and just say, I just had the roughest week, because by the way, it's not with like your name, it's like with a username or whatever, so it's all anonymous. You can be completely anonymous. So people will go on there and just tell them, I had this happen and this happened, and I'm just so tired of working. I'm just, I'm working so hard and all this stuff. And I saw this one person just go on there and say, I was born into money, and I had all this money from my parents, and I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to work. I turned 18. I already had a house, a car, everything. And what stood out to me was he was just like, I felt like I had no purpose. I had all the things I could ever want, but I felt so empty, just so terrible, just yucky inside. And he went on into great detail. And he said, what changed everything was when I decided to just go work. And he's like, and I didn't even need the money. And I just got some job somewhere, like at a restaurant or some store. And then he said, what that did for me is, I didn't care about the paycheck, the $500 or $1,000 or whatever I made every paycheck. He said that was nothing to me. I had hundreds of thousands in my account. I didn't need that. What it helped me was he got to meet people who were struggling or who were living from paycheck to paycheck with a pay. And he said that gave me such a purpose because he's like, I had all these means, and now I could come to work and just smile and shake their hands and tell them how awesome they are. And I would give my paychecks away to them, whoever told me that they were just having a rough time or whatever. It's like, oh, here, you need this week, or you need this next week, And so he said after that, my life was just filled with joy. And I don't know, I soaked that in. I never forgot that. And I said, well, I may not have been born into that situation, but I always kept that with me. I was like, some people have tons of money, and it didn't bring them any happiness at all. What really brought them happiness was the fellowship and the camaraderie with the people, and giving. Giving is huge. I never realized. I always enjoyed, and you always hear that it's better to give than to receive. I've heard that so many times, But when I was young, I didn't understand it as well until I got older, and I started giving back. I love it when I get something, and or I get something from Walmart or something, and I realize, oh, I found a better deal somewhere else, and so I'll get that one too. But then instead of, I don't want to go take that thing back to Walmart, and so I'll just message my friends. That's what I've done that several times, where I'm just like, hey, would you like this? Would you like this? Do you need a leaf blower? Do you need a chainsaw? Or do you need this? Or do you need that? And then somebody would be like, oh yeah, I've been needing one of those, and I'll be like, oh, please take it. And that just makes me feel so much better. And that's happened to me so much more now as being an adult, that I've ran into that situation so much more than when I was a kid. But every single time that happens to me, it's just so good. It brings me a good joy inside, and I love that feeling. So I chase after that feeling now. And anytime I get a chance that I can give something to somebody, I would much rather do that than get something else for myself. But yeah, that was something that stood out to me in 23, and moving forward just quickly through 24, they had lots of laws on domestic relations or divorce, and I don't believe God. I don't think it pleases Him to witness divorce, but we know it happens. We know sometimes people they just don't get along. But there were a lot of circumstances that were laid out in 24 where that was a necessary or an acceptable thing. And so without getting into too much detail on that, I would definitely read through that and take in some of that because there was some really interesting ways. They had lots of guidelines on that. There was in 25, there's laws concerning human relations as well, but there was one that was really interesting to me, and it seemed like carrying on their family's name was very important to them at this time. And in verses 5 through 10, it seemed like it was preferred to them if a man was to die, that if he had a brother, that the brother would then, if the brother wasn't married, I guess would then marry the widow. And that's kind of what I got from that. I guess to carry on that name, but it says, if a brethren dwell together and one of them die and have no children, so there's definitely guidelines in here. If they already had children, then I guess their name would have already been passed down to the kids. But it said, the wife of the dead shall not marry without unto a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go in unto her and take her to him to wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother unto her. And it shall be that the firstborn which she beareth shall succeed in the name of his brother which is dead, that his name shall not be put out of Israel. So that was very interesting. I don't think anybody... it's definitely probably an uncomfortable thing to think about these days. Like if somebody had to go through a situation like that, what society would paint that as. But to them, I think their family name and their legacy of their family was a big part of their nation in Israel. And so, is that better than for a widow to go marry a stranger? Then okay.
It also had a lot to do with the land, because
yes,
land belonged to the family, and every 50 years, all that land would go back to the family.
Wow. So yeah, they could potentially lose out on a lot of that. So it was a good way for them to just to keep that. And 26, offering of the first fruits. There's a lot of laws and guidelines of how to offer that, and there was definitely a verse that I liked. Let me see here. In verse 16, I like that this has been repeated and coming back into keeping the commandments of the Lord. And it said, "This day of the Lord," in verse 16, "This day the Lord thy God hath commanded thee to do these statutes and judgments. Thou shalt therefore keep and do them with all thine heart and with all thine soul. Thou hast advouched the Lord this day to be thy God, and to walk in the ways, and to keep his statutes and his commandments and his judgments, and to hearken unto his voice. And the Lord hath avouched thee this day to be his particular people, as he hath promised thee, and that thou shalt keep all his commandments, and to make thy high above all nations which he hath made, in praise and in name and in honor, and thou mayest be a holy people unto the Lord thy God, as he speaketh." So after all these laws and guidelines that have been through this last few chapters, constantly Moses was reiterating to them to keep these commandments, keep these commandments. And I love that every single time I was reading through Deuteronomy and I found that again, I had to jot that back down, because you can read in detail all of these laws, and they are very detailed and very specific guidelines. But every time I saw a section like that, it just, I better jot that back down, because they said it again, you know. If it's repeated more than once, it's got to be paid attention to, I think. So everything is important in all of these chapters, but every time I saw that, it just spoke to me there to reiterate that. Israel to build an the altar at 27, and we briefly spoke about this when we started Deuteronomy, and this is where the Mount of Gerizim and the Mount of Ebal are detailed. And in 11 and 12, 27, 11, and 12, and Moses charged the people that the day, saying, These shall stand upon Mount Gerizim to bless the people when ye are come over the Jordan, Simon and Levi and Judah and Issachar and Joseph and Benjamin. And then in 13 through 26, the rest of that chapter there, it goes over the curses that should be proclaimed from the other mountain, from the other families. So they had blessings from one side if they were to follow these laws and these commandments from the Lord, and then curses as to what not. What I found interesting is it seems to be, the curses seem to be pretty lengthy compared to the blessing. I think part of that is, well, we've gone over all the blessings, you know, in a lot of these chapters and stuff. So we, and you already know how blessed you are from the Lord. But I think that they really wanted to reiterate that if you don't follow the Lord in these laws, that your nation isn't going to be blessed. It will have some struggles. And these shall stand upon Mount Ebal to curse: Reuben, Gad, Asher, Zebulun, Dan, and Naphtali. And the Levites shall speak and say unto all the men of Israel with a loud voice, Cursed be the man that maketh any graven image or molten image, an abomination unto the Lord, the work of the hands of the craftsmen, and put it in a secret place. And all the people shall answer and say, Amen. And then it goes down further through, cursed be he that does this, and cursed be he that does that. And it goes through the whole rest of chapter 27 doing that. But in chapter 28, Moses goes over the blessings that will befall Israel. He says that, And it shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe and to do his commandments which I have commanded thee this day, that the Lord thy God will set thee on high above all nations of the earth, and all the blessings shall come on thee and overtake thee, if thou shalt hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God. Blessed shalt thou be in the city, and blessed shalt thou be in the field. Blessed shalt thou be the fruit of thy body, and the fruit of thy ground, and the fruit of thy cattle, in the increase of thy kind, and the flocks of the sheep. And blessed shall be thy basket and thy store. Blessed shall be thou be when thou comest in, and blessed shall be when thou goest out. The Lord shall cause thy enemies to rise up against thee, to be smitten before thy face. Thou shalt come out against thee one way, and flee before thee 7 ways. The Lord shall shall command the blessings upon thee in thy storehouses and in all that thou settest thine hand unto, and he shall bless thee in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. So, I will just go ahead and finish this rest part. The Lord shall establish thee in holy people unto himself, and he hath sworn unto thee, if thou shalt keep the commandments of the Lord thy God and walk in his ways, and all the people of the earth shall see that thou art called by the name of the Lord, and thou shalt be afraid of thee. So, I think one reason why the curses were really detailed in 27, at the end of 27 there, is because 28 is very full of blessings as well. So it goes into some blessings. But it also goes down in verses 15. It will say that there is more curse. It will go into more detail on the curses for disobeying God. So in 15 it says, but it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe, to do all the commandments and the statutes which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. So, and then it goes on to, cursed shalt thou be in the city, and cursed thou shalt be in the field. And it goes through all of those that they had just blessed. So I think that I think it was really necessary, and Moses wanted them to really say this out loud to the people, because if you remember, at the very beginning, the Lord spoke all this. They heard the voice of the Lord, and so I think this time around, Moses is saying, you guys are going to need to get over here and over here, and you're going to have to reiterate all of this, because you were children when the Lord spoke this unto your parents, or maybe not even born yet. But it's almost ceremonial, I feel like, maybe, that Moses is saying, you guys, when you get to the land of plenty, then you guys should make this recommitment. It's all about their commitment to the Lord and following what He wants. So we will probably end up stopping there for time, which means that I will have at least another Sunday for Deuteronomy. But I've had a great joy of going over this book. This book was one that stood out to me a lot, just like all the books in the Torah. But the Deuteronomy book was very detailed, and it's almost like the climax of the movie, if you will. When you watch the movie and you get the ending there, that's very climatic. It's very interesting just to see how Moses handled the people at his very last time there with them, and so but I believe next week we'll be able to go through 29 through 34, and we will see and read more about where things end up for Moses there. But thank you guys, and I enjoy the discussion. I learn so much every time, and I hope you do too. So
Thank you, Ryan.
thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.